That is the God who we serve. That's the God who we worship. I'm so glad you're with us today. Whether you came in this week and you are excited for what God has done, or if you come in this week and you are investigating whether Jesus is real or not and what that means for your life, I'm so glad you're with us today. Thanks to those who are online with us as well. A couple of things, and we're going to switch to announcements a little bit. The first thing is that in your program, in your bulletin you came in today, you got a welcome connection card in there. If this is your first time with us, I would encourage you to fill this out and take it back to the information desk. We have a special gift there for you. We'd love to get to know you, if you get to know us. And then if you call Grace Church your home, if you go ahead and put your name up here and drop it in the brown boxes in the back on your way out. And if you have any prayer requests, this is a way if you let us know that you're here, and also any prayer requests that you have, we'd love to pray more specifically for you and with you. Our elder team, our staff, our deacons pray for you each and every week. And we love to pray more specifically with you as we partner together, being the body of Christ together, encouraging each other in that. So, in connection card there. A couple of things to let you know about. We'll start with the push the envelope. Push the envelope is in. It's the big bulletin board that you see out in the lobby. It is our fundraiser for the next generation to help students go to Momentum Youth Conference, to help us do a family experience, our FXs for Kids Zone, for events we do for youth group. It is for investment in the next generation. It's the only fundraiser we do all year. What we ask you to do is we ask you to take an envelope, and the number that's on that envelope, we ask you to put that amount of money in that envelope and take it and put it back in the brown boxes in the back by end of February, beginning of March here. And if all 100 envelopes come back in that manner, we make over $5,000. Which is a massive investment that takes Momentum from $650 a piece down to $275, which is awesome. So thank you for your investment in that. Thank you for what you're able to invest in the next generation in that. So that's the bulletin. If you have any questions, I'd love to connect with you more that way. But as an investment in the next generation, that's what that is back there. Also, the next announcement, we started this back in November. We had been talking about a digital church directory. Which what that means is there's an app. You can go online. There's an app. You can see people the same way what you see in the paper directory. And we ask permission. So if you said yes to be a part of it, you'll be on this. And what it is it's a way for you to connect with each other. If you want to, I wonder how so-and-so is doing. You want to text them or call them. You on your phone or tablet there, you can push that button, and it'll call them or text them from there. If you want to, I'm trying to get to their house. How do I get there? You can push their address, and it goes to your map app, and you can get there. You can also, because some people ask me, I wish we had a picture directory. Do you know what this does? You can put your own picture, your own approved picture, as opposed to the one that otherwise you get like, oh, I didn't smile, didn't look, whatever. We encourage you to do that. So why I'm telling you all this is that this week, I want you to look and watch your email for an email from Breeze. Breeze. It's Breeze Church Directory. Breeze, so the app is blue. That's why everything's blue on the screen. You can get it through your computer website. You can get it through your app on your phone, app on a tablet. We also have paper directories too, but we are saving things by having it online in that as well. So the digital directory. So I know this is new. I need us to take a deep breath. Okay? There's going to be some hiccups. Okay? And we'll get through it. All right? We've taken birthday and anniversaries out, so it's just the name, phone number, what you have agreed to have in there. And it is safe and secure. So while we're sending you an email, you set up your own username and password for it. So it's not some willy-nilly thing you get all the place. It is a safe and secure website network. It's how we keep a lot of our information there, but we can have it set aside for directories in that and what you see. So does that make sense? Kind of? Maybe. So this week, don't delete your Breeze email. And if you don't see one this week, it may go to your spam, and we'll keep talking these next few weeks to make sure we all get on there. If you have any questions or concerns or I don't know, the church's number is in your bulletin there. My email is there. I have to get my cell phone afterwards. Like we can talk through that. Okay? So if you said yes, be on the directory, it'll be there. So Good. And then just a reminder too, we got life groups going on. That's what this is in here. If you're not part of a life group or you're unsure whether joining a life group or not, I would encourage you to continue to go through these questions with someone as well. It's good to continue to work through diving into God's Word together. And each week, part of our worship is not only singing and opening God's Word, it's also giving back to God monetarily, reminding ourselves that the money that God's given us isn't ours, that it's a blessing from God. And that's a reminder. That's what God set aside for us to give money back to Him as a reminder that the money He's given us isn't ours, that our time He's given us isn't ours, our treasures and all that stuff isn't ours, but a gift from Him. A reminder, so we take offering here every week, and that is, you can brown boxes in the back, you can give online, you can give to the mail, you can text the word give, the number in your bulletin there, but we give back as a reminder and part of our worship of God. This is yours. Thank you for who you are. And I want to help connect people to Jesus as we together work towards that. All right? So I'm going to pray right now, and then we'll jump into God's Word. Father, I thank you for who you are. I thank you for being a God who meets us on the icy days, on the sunny days, and the real dark days. And I thank you for being a faithful God. And I pray as you open up your word, may you open our hearts and our ears, and may your Spirit meet us where we are this morning. And may you continue to encourage us and lead us as we walk with you, not just this morning, but this week. No matter whether we've been following you for a long time or investigating you, I pray you meet us where we're at and help us take our next step with you. So thank you for loving us. Thank you for not being done with us. And I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we are in this conversation called Confronting Conflict, where we're going to be talking about conflict. So, which we said last week, some of you are like, yes. And others of you are like, when is it done? When can I leave? And we all have a different feeling about conflict. And before we dive into conflict, I want to talk about something else really fast. And then, so it's a rabbit trail, and then we'll come back to conflict, okay? Here's your rabbit trail. I have been a part of Grace Church on staff here since 2013. I've been lead pastor since 2016. And the elders have encouraged me and granted me a sabbatical. A sabbatical is a time of rest. So for a month, I will not be here. And I want you to hear from me. We're going to continue to talk about this throughout leading up to this. It's going to start March 8th and go to April 8th. I already have plans for preachers to come down and fill in. The people from Akron, Grace Church, our interns and residents who've come down before, they're going to be doing a series all together. I want to let you know a couple things. This is not a forced sabbatical. There's nothing wrong. I have not done anything wrong. It is not a forced sabbatical. We have been having meetings and plans for what I'm excited for us to do and to be a part of when I get back. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. But if you've been part of Grace Church, you know that it has been a bumpy few months, years. And in God's faithfulness, one of the things He talks about is taking a Sabbath rest. And so the Bible, every 7 years, is when the Israelites were supposed to give everything a rest. And that's what I'm advised to do as well. So, I want you to know this ahead of time. We'll continue to talk about it, but so no one's surprised of, where did Nathaniel go? Did he leave? Is he in trouble? No. The reason why I've been encouraged to do this, and I fought it for a while, but I feel like it's something that we need to do, is so I can be the best pastor for you, so that we can continue to run forward together. And if you have any questions, I'd love to talk to you more about it. The elders would be happy to talk to you about it. I just want to let you know, starting March 8th to April 8th, if you don't see me around, that's why. Okay? So, that's your rabbit trail that we'll talk more about next week. Now, to conflict. So, and my joke is I'm talking 5 weeks on conflict, then leaving. So, there you go. Anyway, that's right. So, in conflict is one of those things that is unavoidable. It's not necessarily how to avoid, this conversation is not how to avoid conflict. It's how to deal with conflict in a healthy way when it comes. It's unavoidable because we all have different personalities. We all have different expectations, different experiences. So when we bump into each other, conflict is going to happen. And so how do we deal with that in a healthy way? What does that look like? And so that's how we're talking about this. And unhealthy conflict costs you something. Unhealthy conflict costs sometimes your wellness. When you worry, when you're anxious, when you're uptight, when you're angry all the time, your physical wellness, your mental wellness. It costs you relational-wise, of people back and forth. When you were in conflict, not only with that person, but I don't know about you, when I'm in conflict with that person, it oftentimes has a ripple effect to those closest to me. So it costs you relationally. It also costs you spiritually, a spiritual rightness with God, of when you have this conflict over here and you're not doing that in a healthy way, in that deals with how you even see God and experience God in and through that. So throughout this whole conversation, we are hanging out in a teaching that Jesus gave in Matthew 18. So if you want to open your Bibles up, turn your device to Matthew chapter 18, that's where we're going to be hanging out for the whole duration of our conversation, this whole series. And what we looked at last week was that when we look at, well, let me back up a second. When we think about how to handle conflict from a church standpoint, or from a biblical standpoint, Matthew 18 is the place that people point to, and rightfully so. They point to Matthew 18 starting in verse 15, and we will get to that in a few weeks. But what often happens is we miss the context of where this is found. And what we find is that starting in Matthew 18 verse 1, we see that the disciples came to Jesus with a question. And the question was, which one of us, the 12 disciples, which one of us is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Jesus, who's number one pick? Who is the leader? Who's the best one? And Jesus, being Jesus, hears the question but sees the heart and goes in and tells a story and uses an illustration of being like a lowly child. Humble yourself, being like a child. And that's not being childish, but that's lowering yourself down to the position of a child in ancient times, which was the lowest of the low. So, we said last week that the step one is to humble yourself. Step one is to humble yourself. So instead of looking at what all they did, first we look at ourselves and ask the question, what unmet thing or expectation is not being met right now? What is in my heart, what part of this conflict is unmet in me of what is my part in this conflict? So we need to humble ourselves and ask the question, what is the unmet thing that isn't happening? Because human nature, we are easy at pointing fingers. We like pointing fingers. It's their fault, their issue, and their thing. And what Jesus is kind of saying is we need to slow that down and not be so quick to point the finger, but first to check with God where our heart is in this conflict situation. So today, we're going to be we're going to continue the conversation in Matthew 18, starting in verse 6, says this. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Let that marinate for a second. That's some strong language, isn't it? And so some people take this verse and they pull this verse out and they say, this is why God has a special place and a special punishment and a special anger for those who mistreat little children. And while I don't necessarily agree, I don't necessarily disagree, God's wrath is there, but I don't think that's what Jesus is talking about in this passage. Why do I say that? Because the context. I just mentioned right before this that Jesus pulled out what? The example of being like a little child, little ones. And then he He says, if anyone causes one of these little ones, what does he explain here? Those who believe in me. He's tying that back in. So disciples, followers of Jesus, anyone who causes a follower of Jesus to stumble. Well, what does it mean to stumble? Right? What do we stumble on? Some of us stumble on air. Right? Some of you have stumbled on tree branches. Some of you stumble on rocky ice. Some of you stumble and stub your toe and different things, and we stumble all over the place. But what Jesus is referring here to stumble is something that is purposefully put in the way of causing someone to stumble or having problems following Jesus. It is purposely putting something in the way of them following Jesus. It's purposefully causing them to trip up on purpose for that. And we'll get to that. Well, why would we do that? We'll talk about that in a moment. But to stumble, and you're going to see stumble all throughout here. And the other parts of the Bible say stumbling block. So to stumble, and so we're going to see that. And then it goes on to talk about it'd be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and drowned in the depths of the sea. That seems pretty severe for making someone stumble, doesn't it? And just so we're clear what a large millstone is, because the disciples' times, in the Bible time, the ancient times, they would have heard large millstone, and they'd be like, oh yeah, Farmer Jim Bob has one of those down the street. You and I, we don't know what these kind of things are. This big stone here, that's the millstone, hung around your neck, chuck in the sea. That is severe, is it not? The donkey would take that around, they'd grind the wheat and grind different things. Hung and put around your neck seems extreme. And I think, as I've been studying this conversation, one of the things that I heard said that clicked to me in this is, as a parent, now if you're not a parent, you'll still get this thought and concept. But as a parent, I have 4 short ones in my house, which is wonderful. But if you and I are out having coffee out in the cafe here, and we're talking back and forth out in the lobby, and I'm talking to you, and out of the corner of my eye, I see my youngest 1-year-old son running in the lobby here, which he does, and I see someone stick their foot out and trip him on purpose, point and laugh at him. If I see that as a parent, are we going to be okay? No. Why? Because you picked on my kid and you purposefully tripped him up. Who are we talking about making stumble here? Followers of Jesus, God's kids. Why does God take this so seriously? Because you are causing his kids to trip up on purpose. And you're like, well, how does this have anything to do with conflict? And it seems extreme, and what does this have to do with conflict? And I'm glad you asked these questions. Because we can trip people up and cause them to stumble in obvious ways by saying hurtful things or mean things to them on purpose, gossiping about them, looking to ruin their reputation, blasting that person on social media about all that has happened, saying things to tempt that person to not honor God, pushing someone physically. We can do it in obvious ways. We can also do it in subtle ways. You do it if you're married, or if you have kids, or your kids, your parents, to your neighbors, those who are close to you, your roommate, whoever that is. We all know how to push the buttons to the people closest to us. Do we not? You look at your wife and say, what you're doing right now reminds me of your mother. What do you think is going to happen in that conversation? Right? That doesn't go well. And that person's going to have some issues. And what did you do? You were causing them to struggle following Jesus because words are going to come out that aren't honoring to God. So we can do it through our actions, our behaviors, our reactions, our attitudes. so two ladies are talking, and they come back to, the one lady comes home to her husband and says, oh, I was talking to someone today, and you know what? Their husband doesn't do what really bugs me about you. Yada-da-da-da-da-da. What'd you just do to the husband? And as a kid, you know your siblings don't do this. We all are in a place where we can push the buttons in a subtle way that causes conflict. So the first step is to humble ourselves. The second step is to, well, we'll talk about the second step here in a moment because we have more of chapter 18 to read. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people, there's our word again, to stumble. Such things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come. Woe, throughout the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, is a sign of severe judgment coming. Woe to you. So woe to you. And then it goes, if we think a millstone around the neck is extreme, let's keep reading. If your hand or foot causes you to stumble, there's our word again, cut it off, throw it away. It's better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands and 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. If your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out, throw it away. It's better for you to enter life with 1 eye than have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. Now, I hope by this point you're seeing that Jesus is speaking in hyperbole. And if we need to take an English class thing really fast, which I did not do well in, hyperbole is using an extreme statement to make a point. If Jesus was serious here about cutting our hands and our feet off and gouging our eyes out, and we would be stumps. If it's causing you not to sin, cut it off, gouge it out, we would not be able to walk in here today. That's not what Jesus is saying in here, and there are some things that I think are helpful for us to do in this. And so now we'll jump into step 2, because I know you've been real excited about it. Step 2 is to avoid being a stumbling block. So first is to humble yourself. Second is to avoid being a stumbling block. Now, if we don't know that we're causing someone to stumble, that's one thing. But if you know that someone struggles with alcohol, not being okay for a Christ follower to drink, and you bring the alcohol with you to the party, and you know that that's going to cause that person to have some struggles and some issues, what are you doing? Being a stumbling block. If you know that watching this movie that has stuff in it is going to cause this other person to go down paths that aren't helpful, and you recommend that movie, you know it's going to be awesome, you better watch, you'd love it, and you know that person has that struggle, you are being a stumbling block, knowingly doing that, which causes conflict. Now, every conflict isn't your fault. We talked about this last week. Not every conflict is your fault. But the reason why we're in conflict takes 2 people, at least 2 people, sometimes more. But there is something that an unmet desire is not being met in you that is causing this conflict. Are you acting, reacting, behaving, using your words or attitudes in a way that causes this person to stumble? No, we're talking about those who follow Jesus in this conversation. Because remember, it's the little ones. It's the believers in me. It's his disciples. It's God's kids. Not everyone is a child of God. Let that sit for a moment. Everyone is created in God's image. In order to be a child of God, you have to be part of his family. Part of his family, you have to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. He died and rose again. Confess your sin. Believe in who he is. Be part of the family. That's part of being part of the family, being welcomed into him. We are adopted into his family. We're not born into it. So, you can email me later about all that. Great. So, talking about God's kids, so not causing them to avoid being a stumbling block. And Jesus talks about, I think I have it, no, but I don't. All right, so we'll put that up there now. Is to recognize that you need to take sin seriously. Sin is a rebellion against God, his heart, his directives, and desires for our life. So it's rebelling against God, his heart, his directives with it, the way he wants us to live, his desires for our life. Does God really have the best interest at heart for you? Does God really care how you're doing? Does God really care to live this way, what it's going to cost me to do this? And so to recognize that we need to take sin seriously. Because the same way of pointing a finger of that person, it is so easy to point out the other person's issue in the conflict. And to not look at what part in my sin is causing this. And just sin as a whole, we do a really good job of just kind of smoothing over. It's who I am. Like, it's just not, I'm just a gossipy person. I just like informing people. Just what I do. I inform. Do you have to tell all the details to all the people all around all the things? Especially what that person did to you, what they did, and what they didn't do, and all the things? You know, just lust is just there, and so all these pictures and videos, and it's all on my phone, and all that's on TV, like it's who I am. Like, what is it? Yeah, God said, I know Jesus said not to hate and not to murder, but I hate that person. You know what they did to me? You know what they believe? I hate that person. Yeah, God says not to lie, but it's just a white lie. It's not a big deal. It's just a little white lie. It's not going to hurt the relationship that bad. It's just a little bit. A little bit. A little bit. Why doesn't anybody trust me anymore? I don't know what happened. We all are able to coat our sin over really well, but not go and see this, but point out the sin in someone else's life. And Jesus talked about this in Matthew 7. And we'll get to that. I'm not there. We'll get to there. Remember that. Okay. So, Timothy Keller had a quote I thought was helpful, and it says, "An ounce of sin can harm us more than a ton of suffering. Sin can hinder our hearts, so we lose everything. But suffering, if handled rightly, can make us wiser, happier, and deeper." What was Jesus able to accomplish with suffering on the cross? Saved us all. Suffering. I don't like suffering. Great. Welcome to the club. But Jesus promised that in this life you're going to have trouble. But take heart, for I've overcome the world. And he's calling us out of a life of self and sinfulness into a life of right living, righteousness, into a life of seeing him fully, of having this life and life to the fullest. And we all know where our pitfalls are. And you might have said to yourself, we talked about this before, I'm just an angry person. This is who I am. I'm just angry. It's not who you are. If you are a Christ follower, you are a follower of Jesus who struggles with anger that we need to be aware of, and that we may need to take radical steps to get past that and remember that. So first thing is to recognize, to take your sin seriously. And next thing is to remember that your sin affects others in your life. I think of a still body of water and having a rock, throwing it up, and watching it go bloop. What happens? This still body of water has been affected by the bloop. Our sin affects those around us, especially those closest to us. Part of the reason why conflict boils up and comes over those who we live with and who are closest to us, because we know each other the best, we know how to push other buttons, and sin affects and ripples And not just your sin, but other people's sin all ripples together, and that's why we run into conflict in this way. So we remember that sin affects, we need to recognize, we take sin seriously, that when we're convicted of sin, we see sin in our life, we take that seriously, that it affects other people, and then, this is where I was before, and I got ahead of myself. Radically remove what leads to sin. This is where I think Jesus is using his hyperbole with. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. If that relationship that you have causes you to stumble, maybe you need to step back from it or cut it off. If the computer or internet or that streaming thing, whatever it is causing you to stumble, you need to cut it off. If that thing in your life that is causing you to be an idol before God, maybe you need to cut it off and take radical steps to cut sin out of your life. You know, it's just this thing I love more than God. It's no big deal. Have you read the Bible lately? Idols are a very big deal to God. From the beginning. Why? Because he knows what that does to relationship with him, to other people. And when we say yes to him, it is not just a yes to Jesus. I said yes to him. I'm not going to hell. I'm going to heaven. And life's going to be awesome. It is a commitment. It is a promise that God, you are the Lord of my life. And I am with you. I'm for you. And I'm going to walk with what you tell me to do. It is not just I sat in church, I got this, I said the prayer. It is a daily movement and walking with him, being changed by him. And as sin comes up and we're convicted of sin, to take steps to radically remove those things. That sometimes, as Christ followers, we need to walk with a limp. Because we can't be around certain things. Or certain people or certain things or whatever it is. If your cell phone is causing a problem, maybe you need to change your cell phone or get a filter to it. If being a certain sporting event is causing you to lose your salvation every time you watch the game, that's you're not going to lose salvation. But if you maybe you need to take a step back from sports things because it's become an idol in your life. We need to prioritize and remember who we worship. And what does it mean to worship God in that? So if we humble ourselves, and in the conflict that you're facing right now, and if you're not in a big conflict right now, great. But you will be, because it's unavoidable. And how do we handle it well? And the first step, humble ourselves. Next one is to not purposely be a stumbling block. To help someone follow Jesus in that way. And our bottom line this week is this: that real humility takes responsibility for how our actions impact others. We talked about humbling ourselves. And real humility, so it could be that the conflict that you are dealing with right now, it could be to the place where you need to go to the person you're having conflict with and admit what your part of it is. Not pointing the finger of, sometimes it's not healthy to actually go to the person and do that, but if there's a conflict, it's healthy to do for you to go to that person and talk what that out is. Or the first step for you may be just to take responsibility that, yeah, some of this conflict is my issue. And some of the conflict is my fault. And it could be 0.01%. Could be. But take that step and take ownership of that, admitting to where that is and with God in that. So Jesus, we did a sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. It's called Sermon on the Mount because people are on the mount when he gave it, on a mountainside, in Matthew 7. So I got way ahead of myself because that was 15 minutes ago, and here we are. In Jesus' teaching the sermon here, and you've probably heard this before, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank, or some translations say log, in your own eye? Who can say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank or a log or a beam, some translations use beam, in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the speck out of your own eye, then you'll be able to see clearly the speck from your brother's eye. Now, some people use this as, I can never have any conflict because I've always got big planks in my eyes. You need to get past that excuse. That is not what Jesus is saying. He's saying similar to what we just talked about, that we need to check our hearts first, what our part of it is first, what our unmet desires in this relationship is not happening first, before we can go up to that person and say, hey, you know what? Your issue is, because we've had people do this to us. We've had people come up to us who we know what is going on in their life, what they've done. And they come up to us and say, oh, by the way, you need to do yada-da-da-da-da-da. And you know they've been struggling with that thing the whole time, and their plank's sticking way out here. And what do you want to do to them? Smack them. If we're honest, right? Let's not be the plank people. Let's check our heart with God first. Take ownership of our part of the conflict as Christ followers. And if you are a Christ follower, I know not everybody in this room is a Christ follower, and I'm so thankful for all the different parts in the journey that we are on in this room. But if you have said yes to Jesus and you are a Christ follower, we see throughout the Bible the person who's responsible to take the first step in resolving conflict, Christ followers. Why? Because we are bringing God's kingdom here on earth, as is in heaven. Now, there are some conflict things where this is not a health situation to have that conversation. I understand that. But there are some times where we just are like, it's their fault. They would just wake up. So, what am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to take your responsibility for your actions. What part of it did you play in it? That's the speck thing, the plank and the speck thing. What I'm asking you to take responsibility for your actions. Because in our current culture, it's everybody else's fault. Everybody else did it. It's always somebody else's fault. So I'm asking us, as our second step, humble yourself and don't be a stumbling block on purpose. And sometimes being a stumbling block is, they'll come to me. Oh yeah, they'll come. If I hold off these things and I won't talk to them, or I'll make their life miserable, they'll come. They'll come to me, don't you worry. They'll come. We as God's children have a higher responsibility. And before you say, well, somebody else, you said yes to following Jesus. You made a commitment to follow him. It's not a light thing to do. Pick up your cross daily and follow him. But it is so worth it. It is so good to experience his forgiveness, to experience his joy, to experience his love, to experience his hope, to experience him, the God who created the universe, the God who created you and me, to experience a right relationship with him. Oh, that's good. And to be able to see lives change as the Spirit moves. Now, if you go to that person and you take your responsibility for your actions and it does not go well, whose responsibility am I asking for to take responsibility for the actions? Yours or theirs? Yours, right? I'm asking you to take yours. Whose actions do we get the opportunity to stand before God and answer for? Ours. I get the opportunity to stand before God and answer for the time that He's given me here on earth, which most days scares the spit out of me. But I also know the hope of what happens as Jesus stands up beside me and takes the good and bad and ugly of my life and says, he's with me. I paid for that. He's with me. I paid for that. Such good things. So, conflict. If you're like me and you've been waiting for this conversation to be done and you can't wait until this whole series is done, take hope you're not alone. And I would encourage you to take the first step is to ask God to search your heart in the conflict of what unmet desires in me. What step do you want me to take in this conflict? If you are conflict like, yes, let's go. There's an echo there, that's good. There's your squirrel moment. When we update the auditorium, we're going to put sound panels up and it'll be great. There's your squirrel moment. What was I talking about? Okay, so if you love conflict, may I encourage you to pause, pump the brakes, and ask God to search your heart of what unmet desires or what things you hoping to throw at that person or to get at that person or prove that you were right. All right? Does that sound good? So, some of you will be asking the question, when do we get to talk about the other person? We'll get there. That's coming. We've got a 5-week series. It's one conversation over 5 weeks. So we'll continue to build on itself. But first, Jesus points out pretty clearly that the first step is for us to deal with our hearts first in the conflict before we go and deal with the conflict going around. Does that sound good? Make sense-ish? Kind of? Great. I'm going to ask the band to come on up, and I want to give you some time to pray. And I would love for you to take some time. You can go ahead and close your eyes and bow your head. And I would love for you to take some time. And maybe the first thing that you need to do today is to ask God, what unmet desires in this conflict am I not being met with? And then listen to that answer. Maybe you need to ask for the boldness to go have a conversation this week to take responsibility for the actions and the part that you've played in this. Or maybe you just need to ask God to reveal Himself real and afresh to you to even want to have anything to do with conflict. So go ahead and do that, and then I'll close this here in a moment. You, Father, are faithful. Thank you for being a God who doesn't change, that your character is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I pray for my friends in this room, those who are online, that you will give us the wisdom and the boldness and to be able to quiet our hearts and our minds to listen to what part in the conflict did I play? What unmet desire is not being met? And then I pray you give us boldness and wisdom to take the step of taking responsibility for our actions, of what part in this did I play? And may we walk in you, may we know you in a fresh way. May people see you through us. And may your name be known as holy through our lives, through our actions, through our reactions, through our words and our behaviors. Thank you for who you are. And I just pray that there will be some conversations done this week in an honoring way to you, and that conflicts will come to some resolution. And if not, I pray that you will continue to work on our hearts to take responsibility for us. So thanks for loving us. Thank you for being a good father. I ask all this